All right. Thanks for joining the Make Guitar podcast. It's the 31st of July, 2022. How you doing, Mitch?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Kirk?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, got a lot of things going on. Um, and yeah, I'm ready to talk about it. I'm surrounded by my examples. So
Nice. Yeah. Hey, did you have a good time at the meetup on Friday? I guess was that Friday?
Friday, yeah, it was just 2 days ago. It was great. I think it was a rousing success of the first meeting of the Eurorack SF group.
Nice. Yeah, it was pretty good. Um, yeah, I brought my battery powered, palette, and it was pretty good. Had some good headphone, synth action. I think the barista was a big fan. He asked me, he's like, "Hey, are you guys recording music?" And I said, "Oh no, we're making some electronic music." And he's like Kraftwerk, and I'm like, "Yeah, like Kraftwerk."
Almost like he could hear us.
I know. Yeah, it was in the ether.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, people like I went and saw Kraftwerk last month in San Diego, and uh, I bought one of those, those cheap knockoff Kraftwerk t-shirts outside of the show because the line for the real ones was huge, and I'm sure they were very expensive. But uh, people all over San Diego are like, Kraftwerk. They didn't even know that they were on tour, but they were like, really excited to see like a Kraftwerk t-shirt. And I don't know. I think people like Kraftwerk has really made an impact, even if people don't know that they're still like they still exist and they're still on tour. Um, Kraftwerk's really amazing. There's really nothing like them, but everything in electronic music is like them.
Yeah, they did make a mark. They kind of set
Mhm.
the bar and like laid down the foundation, of synth music.
Right,
I think a lot of stuff borrows from Kraftwerk.
right. Yeah, and that day we talked a lot about, like Don Buchla and Robert Moog and, other kind of influences on the synth music scene. But I think Kraftwerk, they showed us another way. Uh, like there's something very utopian and very kind of beautiful about their sound. A lot of times, like Buchla music or some of those other guys would be, it can be very eerie and unnerving for people.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that Morton Subotnick
Mhm.
Silver Apples is like it's like all these metallic sounds. It's pretty crazy. But it's funny, the Kraftwerk and like Tangerine Dream are very like sequencer driven, like
Mhm.
the audio. So I'd call that like the Berlin school,
Yes.
right? So we had the East Coast, which is like the Moog stuff, like Wendy Carlos, switched on Bach, right? And then we have the West Coast, which is like Silver Apples and Don Buchla and stuff. But then later out of this comes like Berlin School, which is all these like driving repetitive like sequencer, just like endless sequencer sequences, looping,
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was focusing my efforts on Friday, was trying to master the sequencer on the Micro Freak. Um,
Oh yeah, that's great.
there's a lot
Yeah.
you can do with that, but like you need to spend time with it, figure out how to use it.
Yeah, we should talk more about that. Yeah, I set up my rack. I put in the Ornament and Crime, and it has a few things in it that act like a sequencer. So it actually has a sequencer module, and then it has a couple like touring machine type modules, and a kind of another sample and hold thing that you can work like a sequencer. So I kind of set up the copy machine or copier machine with an LFO. So then that creates like a sequence, like an arpeggiation kind of going up and down the scale, you know? So
That's
that was
cool.
kind of
That
fun.
module does a lot.
It does. It has like maybe 20 apps in it. I don't remember. It's got a ton of apps. I think if you install the alternate firmware for, it's called Hemispheres, I think there's like 52 apps on Hemispheres.
Wow.
Yeah, Hemispheres is a little different. You run 2 apps at a time, so the apps are kind of smaller, you
Hmm.
know. In the regular Ornament and Crime, the original firmware, it's like every app has like 4 channels basically. So you get like 4 quantizers, 4 samplers, 4, or 4 sample and holds. With the sequencer, you get 2 sequences, but there's a CV and like a gate or envelope out. So there's 2 channels on each sequencer, right? And then each sequence too, you can have, I think, up to 4 sequences for each of the 2 sequencers, and then you can chain them together. You can't really like create a sequence of the sequences, but you can chain them together. You can say play 1 and then 2 and play 1 and then 2, or you can say play 1, 2, and 3, right?
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is super good. It's super fun. You have to, it's a little hard to program. I'll
Hmm.
show it to you sometime, but it's like when you use this encoder, so it's like a rotary thing. You turn the knob and press it, right? You know, and then it has these little bars. So you turn it and the bar goes up and the note is getting higher in pitch, and you turn it and it goes down, it gets lower in pitch, right? But then it displays the note in the form of 1.00, right? So that means like C at octave 1.
Right.
And if you turn it like 1 point, like you do 1.01, then it's like C sharp. Which is like totally frustrating to program.
I suppose if you don't know the musical notes and that's the way you think, maybe that's good. But it sounds a little too mathematical to me.
Yeah, it's not easy. It could have been, that could be implemented better. I think that it's limitations to how the whole software is put together and the way that it runs on the machine. It has a tiny little screen. That
Hmm.
was one of the issues I had at the cafe, because we were sitting out in the back on the patio, and the sun, it wasn't bright, like there was overcast, but it was pretty bright out. The sun was out, and so I had to put my hand over the screen. I couldn't read it. It was too
Yeah, I
bright.
had to do that as well because the
Yeah.
microphone has a little screen.
Yeah. It's it then, right? It's the same kind of screen, I bet. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I'd recommend Ornament and Crime to anybody that's buying synth gear if they need that type of module. Like it's kind of a flexible module. It does a whole bunch of stuff. Like I can always find a use for it, and I like it so much. I have 2. Like I bought
Right.
2 of them. You know, because
That
you can do stuff like you could make one of them. You can put it in this Peaks app. You can load up the Peaks app, and Peaks is like 4 envelope generators. And so, yeah, you can program each or set options on each envelope generator, like the rise and fall time. You can say what kind of envelope it is, like is it an attack decay? Is it ADSR? Is it exponential or linear or you know logarithmic? You know what I mean? So it's all these options, right? So you could take one of them and use it like the sequencer mode, and then take the other Ornament and Crime and make it 4 envelopes.
mhm.
Then you could trigger the envelopes from the sequence. So it's super flexible, right?
Sounds cool. Do they have a Ornaments in Crime analog in VCV rack? Because maybe that's a way that one can try them out.
That's a good question. I'm gonna look it up. Ornament and Crime VCV rack.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that if I ever get into Eurorack, um, it's going to take me a long time to get up to speed on you know like I'm at a point with the micro freak where I pretty much know how to achieve what I'm trying to do. Like I know how to what steps to do to kind of set out and make something happen. But I think with Eurorack, it's going to be a lot um, more time to get up to speed on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. Like if you get a synth, like even one with a keyboard, right? Just like a classic electric piano style synthesizer, it's pre-wired.
Hmm.
right? So all the voices are already built in there, and then you can trigger them with the keyboard or maybe MIDI coming in,
Right.
right? If you have a bunch of Eurorack modules, like you don't have any audio at all until you connect patch cables and get the audio working, you know, so you need to send your oscillator through a VCA, like a voltage controlled amplifier, and then you need an envelope to drive the amplifier,
Hmm.
right? And then you got to send the out of the amplifier to your mixer and then send that to your output. And then you got to trigger your envelope. So you got to have some triggers coming in from the envelope. And then the trigger needs whatever is triggering it probably has a clock that it needs to come in. Yeah, it's like ridiculously complicated just to get bit, bit,
Right.
you know, right?
And then if you want to like sequence chords, you have to get something that will like snap it to a scale or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Ornament and Crime is like that's one of the reasons I got it originally is it has like a lot of the modes have a quantizer.
Hmm.
So in any of the apps that need to quantize stuff is hooked into the quantizer. So they have it has the built-in quantizer and it applies to all the apps basically, or all the ones that would use it. So like Peaks doesn't use it because it's just making envelopes, but the sequencer uses it, the sample and hold uses it, Touring Machine uses it, all the other apps, you know.
Hmm.
So that's why I got it originally because I was gonna get a quantizer and I thought like, oh, this has all this utility and it has the quantizer, you know. But yeah. So if you want to do polyphony, like you want to get more than one note, you're like, oh, I want to play a chord, right? Then you need all that stuff we just talked about, you know, VCO, VCA, ADSR, and a trigger somewhere. You need to do all that again for the second note of your chord and the third. It's like ridiculous.
Hmm.
You know, that said, you know, what's funny is you have the Microfreak, right? Well, Microfreak is built on Platts. So
Hmm.
Platts is like an oscillator from Mutable Instruments, and Platts has a bunch of modes in it. It has 16 modes, right? And it's got a classic oscillator mode, an FM mode, kind of a um, like a rings mode. So it's like plucked or strings or resonant, like you know, um, sounds like a triangle or some kind of real world kind of stuff. You know, like physical modeling. You know, so I think is what they call it, right? It also has a chord generator in it, right? So you can have one oscillator trigger it and get a chord out of it, right? The problem though is it uses voltage control or knobs to pick the chords. So you
Right.
can tune the note, but then you're like, okay, I have to pick the chord modality or whatever you call it, right? You know, like major, minor, sustained four or whatever. And then the voicing for the chord is the other knob. And that's like, to me, that's more complicated. It's one thing to plug all the cables together, you know, but I understand that. But then it's another weird thing to try and get the voices to line up, you know, by turning the knobs, you know, or sending in voltage control to pick the voices that you want, you know.
Right. Yeah, I haven't done much with that. I mean, I of course played with the sounds, but it does have the ability to, to select different modes and things like that. Um, musical modes. And uh I think you adjust that in the mod matrix. I don't know. I haven't experienced it, but yeah, it's pretty powerful. You can definitely you can play notes on the keyboard, but the beauty of stuff like this is that you can kind of like uh you can get the synthesizer to kind of work for you,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
generative.
Well, you know what I think is it's one thing to think in traditional music, you know, where you're like, okay, we're going to do chord progression and here are the chords, you know, and you get more complicated. You're like, well, I'm playing the guitar and the bass is covering this note, so I'm going to use this voicing or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But I think on the synth, you can also play it by ear. You're like, I'm not going to program, I'm just going to turn the knobs. That sounds about right. You know, I'm going to send this random voltage in here and it's going to do some chord changes, but maybe I'll attenuate that voltage until it's sounding good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I use the arpeggiator a lot, and then just play with the knobs, and that's, like as you will often point out, it's not necessarily music, but it's a, it creates a vibe.
Yeah. Well, you know what, I think the key to like learning this stuff, it's pretty complicated, right? There's like lots of knobs, like every module is different, like there's these menus sometimes in some modules where, some people like it, some people don't, but sometimes you have to dive through the menus to find the things that you want. But I think like if you focus on one aspect and you're like, okay, I'm just going to master this one thing, and then later look at another aspect and master that.
Yeah, actually, maybe we should do that with the Eurorack meetup. We can say like, today we're going to work on a thing, or maybe each individual is, going to have like a focus for the day, but um, it's like that's kind of, I think the point of having a meetup group is that you can have a shared experience like that, where you sort of like today's exercise is going to be, um, working with noise or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, let everybody do it for themselves, pick what they want to do.
Right.
But yeah, it's good if you have an exercise. I kind of had the plan actually that I was going to do the arpeggiated thing with copier machine and the LFO going in.
Hmm.
I'd done that before and it sounded kind of cool, and I remembered, and I was like, I'm going to try that again and do it with this new rack setup that I have. I had done something similar earlier with the sequencer, but I was having trouble. I wanted to get like a second voice
Hmm.
going on. So then I was like, I had the idea I was going to redo everything and use a different app and do it a little differently to try and get the second voice incorporated.
Do you feel like you were successful in achieving your goals for that day?
Yeah, I think it sounded okay for a while, right? I think, the thing with the Eurorack stuff is it's actually hard to reproduce a lot of times. So you can get a
Yeah.
sound and then it's like you can get a similar sound, but it's not quite the same. And sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't get, because the way the modules are running, like they don't sync up. You don't hit the button and everybody starts at the same time,
Hmm.
right? So the LFOs might be a little out of sync, and a lot of the stuff's analog. So if you turn the knob just like a little bit, it's different. Um, so, if I pull out all the cables, then it's just like you're starting over again, and you're like,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna make a new thing right now. It could be similar, but maybe, it's its own thing.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, I think that's kind of the way it is with guitars. Even if you dial in your, like the knobs on your pedals, or you don't touch them, things can be just a little different. Maybe the delay isn't in sync with your rhythm track or something like that. I think that's okay. I mean, it's
Yeah,
good. I think it's good when there's some kind of variance.
yeah,
But on the same, on the other hand, if I set a preset on my microfreak and I have a sequence that's part of that patch, um, it's kind of nice that I don't have to, like, if I'm live in front of an audience, I don't have to struggle to, get that sequence to come up and sync with the drum track. And, I can worry about playing guitar or whatever else I'm doing.
totally. Yeah. Hey, speaking of guitar stuff, you know what I did this morning is I got up and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna clean up.
Mm.
It was good. It required it. So I cleaned up all these cables and stuff that were on the floor, and then I got my pedal board out, and then I tore all the pedals off of it, and then I remade the pedal board.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's a
Yeah, I need
small
to do
pedal
that.
board, so I have like 4 pedals and the tuner on it. So it's not that many pedals. So I put it all together, and then I tried to do it all with homemade pedals. So they were
Mhm.
all DIY pedals.
Are they Velcroed down?
I didn't put the Velcro on them, all of them. I think 1 or 2 of them had Velcro on it. So they're Velcroed, but the other ones are not Velcroed yet. Maybe they'll be Velcroed.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah,
an idea of using some zip ties to hold them down instead of Velcro.
how would you do that? What do you zip tie them to?
Well, I have one of those pedal train kind of pedal boards, right? So it actually is kind of these little beams and there's like a gap between them.
Okay.
So if you had a long enough zip tie, you could just wrap it around the pedal, you know?
Oh, that's good. Then you don't have to like edit or alter the pedal at all. Like I really don't want to rip the rubber pad off of any of my pedals,
Yeah.
but that's how you do it, right? You rip off this rubber pad and then you just stick Velcro on there.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't want to rip the rubber off. Yeah, that's a kind of a weird thing. You know, you know what was funny is I had some pedals Velcroed down, and one of them it looks like I put the Velcro on the sticker that's, you know, that sticker that's in the middle of the rubber.
Yeah.
And then when I peeled it off, the sticker came off. Like the sticker stayed stuck to the Velcro, right? And the pedal came loose. So yeah, I'm not sure. These pedals, though, since I made them myself, they don't have any rubber on the bottom. So
Right.
that's kind of maybe good, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, it's the Boss ones I think that are the most difficult because they have that big rubber pad.
Yeah.
But most of the other ones I think are like this. It's got a big sticker on it, but Velcro would stick to this.
Yeah. You could put some Velcro on the sides or on the top and bottom,
Mm-hmm.
maybe out of the way of the sticker, you know? Yeah, anyway, so I got my pedal board going, plugged it in. I swept, I got rid of all the cables. Actually, I still need to clean up a few more things, but I made a little space and I got this space with the pedal board in it. Yeah.
I have to redo my, you'll notice I'm not using my microphone today. Whoops. I have to redo, like set up my whole sound, set up the mixer again.
Yeah.
Everything's just been in flux so much. Probably should clean my workbench again because I've got some new projects that I'm going to start in on. Actually, let me show you this real quick. This is my pickup winder.
Oh, nice.
It's winding.
It's totally winding.
Yeah. So so I got that, and I haven't actually bought the winding or the form bar wire yet. It's really expensive. So I'm going to spend a lot of money on this hobby, but I did buy some. I'm just doing a live unboxing. I bought from the same guys who sent me the winder. He sells the kits for building a Strat pickup, and I just bought 2 right now, just to get my feet wet. But the kit includes
2 Strat pickups.
Yeah.
Should it be 3?
Well, I think the guy was a little confused by my purchase too, because he's like, you just want like a white one and a cream one? Let me just make sure I got that straight. And I was like, yeah, this is my getting my feet wet. I'll buy whole sets in the future, but like,
yeah,
I'm just figuring out how this works. So so I've got everything I need here aside from the wire. So
nice.
The magnetic wire I will have to buy, but that'll be fun.
Nice. Yeah, I went to this, it was an online workshop on using the Daisy Seed. It's kind of like an Arduino like microcontroller, but it's got it's specifically for DSP stuff, for like audio processing. Like you can make reverbs and delays and things and synthesizers out of the chip,
Hey.
So it was kind of good. It was like a little workshop. It wasn't super informative, but it kind of was, good. Gave me some ideas. But the guy that ran it, he has a thing called Synth UX Academy, right? And I guess he runs some kind of class where people do like, product design. And, one of the things they do is they do like design for synthesizers, and then they use this chip for the synthesizer, right? But he has a bunch of interviews that are kind of like podcasts, right, where he interviews people. And I watched one of the interviews today with a guy who makes like a box that's it's like a synthesizer kind of tool that like it's hard to describe. It basically it puts out kind of it's called the noodler, and noodler puts out MIDI messages, but it like arranges them in like with music theory. So it basically puts together like chords, and it finds notes that go with the chords, and it'll make like a pad or like a motif that goes with the chords that are playing, you know?
Hmm.
Right. And they interviewed that guy, and he talked about producing this product, right? So he made a product, him and his buddy, and they you know, they talked about like coming up with the idea, coming up with the user interface design of it, and then talked about manufacturing. And it was a really nice interview, you know, it had some really cool information in it, you know.
Cool. Was this on YouTube as a video interview?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll send it to you if you want
Yeah,
to
I'd like
look.
to see that. I'm very, I'm interested in this whole idea of like manufacturing. I work for a company that manufactures products, and I help to manufacture them. So like I see how they've got their, you know, their setup, like how they kind of order parts and have the right amount of parts on hand and things like that. Sometimes you cannot have the right amount of parts on hand because you can't get them. But um, like with the pedals, I'm starting to finally have like a decent inventory of parts where I can, start in on a project and maybe I already have the parts for it. And maybe I'll only have to order a couple things, but it definitely takes a while to get there. You have to really kind of build up an inventory.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like when I started, like every time I bought parts, I always bought like 10. It depends on what the thing is. If it's like resistors and they're really cheap, I'll buy like 200, you know, but if they're like if they cost any kind of, you know, if it's going to cost me like $5 or $6 or $10, like I might buy 10, you know,
Right.
right? And now it's great because I have parts to spare, right? They mention like ordering parts and getting a hold of parts in this video, and this was actually kind of a really interesting conversation they had, and they were basically saying like you can't buy the parts like in the States, right?
Hmm.
The one guy was American, and then the other guy that runs the podcast, he's in like I don't know, like the Netherlands or something, like he's in Europe somewhere. But he's like, yeah, you know, it's really hard to buy parts here, and the other guy's like, yeah, I can't get parts, I can't go down the street and get them, they're, you know, it's just impossible to find them. But then he's like, in China, they just have these like markets for anything, right? And you just go there and there's like an electronics market and you can just walk through and buy like any kind of parts, you know?
Right.
Um, and then he talked about like, this was an interesting thing too. He talks about, they had run a Kickstarter, right? And he said like their Kickstarter like started, right? I don't know, like it was successful,
Mhm.
and they'd gotten some money, and they'd gotten like 200 or 600 orders for the product, right? And then he said like they had to make them. So
Mhm.
they had designed it so it's like a single circuit board with all the parts on it, and then they had the circuit board and the parts assembled in China, right? And so that was a lot cheaper. He said he tried to source getting them assembled in the United States, and he said it was like it was going to cost them $300 per board. But at
Interesting.
$300 per board, that's like as much or more than the cost of the product. Like I think their product was going to cost around $300,
Yeah.
right? So he said in China it was about a quarter of that price. So that makes it like a viable product at that point, right? Because you need to charge like 4 times what you were paying, you know, like for
Right.
materials and stuff and production, right? But then they still had to put them all in the boxes, right? And so there's some assembly there, but most of it was assembled. So they just had to put it in the box and then close it up and stuff, you know. But
Right.
he said like they got all the things, got the boxes, got the parts, they started assembling everything together. And then they did like, you know, 10 the first day, and then the next day they did like 20, you know, because they got their system going. And then he said like after they'd done about 100 or so, they were like, oh man, we can't, this is too much work, like we can't do this anymore, right? because you know, if you sold like if you wanted to sell like 5,000, you know, you'd just be working all day assembling parts. You wouldn't be making your next product or improving the existing product, right?
Right.
You know,
You have more employees.
yeah, right. You know, so he said that that's what one of the things they did is they hired someone to assemble them, but then later they just basically moved all the production to China. And they met a guy who was like, he's actually an American who moved to China to do this kind of industrial like assembly stuff, manufacturing, right? And so then they could communicate with him, and then he kind of set everything up there, and he had kind of like a factory, and they do like, it sounded like their factory does products like this, but they take orders. So they do it for multiple companies.
Okay. So I'm sure they're nothing like Foxconn or whatever, you know, wherever iPhones are made.
No,
Like it's just like a small shop.
no, yeah, yeah. Right. But he says now what they do is they do all the assembly in China, like everything. So just like they just basically say, hey, we need 10 units or 100 units. And then the place in China makes the boards, they assemble the boards, solder the boards, send them to this other place, and that other place puts them all together and flashes the, you know, the firmware and tests, and then puts it in a box and mails them off, you know.
That's great. You know, I'm afraid that's going to happen with the company I work for. They're going to just say like, we're having everything that you do now done in China, where the
Well,
equipment is made.
yeah, it's a thing. Well, they brought that up in the video, and they were saying like, yeah, it's too bad because like that's where like all the innovation is happening. Like people are able to make these things and then create a product and sell it, but you can't do that here because one, you can't get the parts, and then two, the manufacturing costs too much.
Right.
Right. And so like, what are you going to do? You're like, okay, I'm running a company, and you know, you could say like, oh, buy American or whatever, but like all the big companies that you like and all your big brands, they're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
And
you can't like pick on the small manufacturers and say like, hey, well, we have to hold you to a higher standard, you know?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, people will say that like if the iPhone were made in the US, it would cost way more because of labor, but also because like all the parts for anything that you want to have manufactured are far away from where the assembly plant would be. You know, like um, in China, these locations are set up for the supply chain. Like everything that you need is right there. Like there's some city where a bunch of, is it um, Shenzhen, or I don't know. There's some city in China that's very modern, um, but a lot of foreign companies make their labs, their R&D labs, home there because they can just go down to the market and get any component that they want to develop their product.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's totally it. Right. You know, and it's too bad because like there used to be stuff like that here. Like you
Mhm.
used to be able to do that here, you know, like there was Radio Shack and there was other places. I remember going to the East Bay when I was in art school, and they had a place out there where you could get nuts and bolts and gears and just like just weird stuff for mechanical assembly, you know, and I don't even know if that's there anymore, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure some of those places still exist. Like there was a really great electronics shop in Minneapolis called Acme Electronics, um, in the warehouse district, where I spent a lot of time. And um, I hope that's still there. And I would imagine that, you know, like local businesses have, you know, been able to patronize them. So they've been able to continue running a brick and mortar store, but you never know. I mean, a lot of things have changed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough, you know. It's like you got to just buy everything. I guess like they did, like you said, I know that's the cases. There's just some areas in China that are just industrial, just like these giant, you know, miles long industrial areas where everything happens. So like if you need your parts, they're like someone's making nuts and bolts down the street. Someone on the other side of the street is making all the electronic parts, you know, and then somebody like a couple blocks over is doing like the aluminum cases or the boxes or whatever, you know, or some kind
Yeah,
of plastic assembly that you need, you know. And so you can just get everything you need, right? You know, all in one place, right?
yeah,
And we
yeah.
just
There's
don't
all
have
these
that here,
garage
you know.
shops. Like if you need something made, you can find somebody who will just like, you know, make a mold and start producing that part for you.
Yeah, yeah. you know. So, but anyway, so that was that was kind of eye-opening, and I was like, wow, yeah, I wonder how you do that with guitar pedals, you know, like could you do that? I mean, I think you could. You have to work it out though. Like I feel like
Yeah.
one, you'd have to move to you know, surface mount parts so that they could be assembled by machine,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah, I think
then
AHS Pedals has a like a US provider that creates all of their um the bones of their pedals. Like they're a circuit board with surface mount parts mounted on, you know, assembled by machine, and then they get the boards at JHS and start assembling the pedals that way.
yeah, there could be some places in the States, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that the company I work for uses a contractor that's in the East Bay for our PCBs. Um, and there are some issues, but I don't know the cost. Um, but the turnaround time is, you know, that's why it's really important to have somebody close by, because like PCB way, it takes, you know, like a week or whatever to get your stuff right.
It takes a couple weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, just for the boards. I'm not sure. They do the assembly too. I haven't used that service though. But yeah, but anyway, yeah, so that's something, you know, I don't know. I'm gonna look into that, you know, just to see, you know, just to try that, see if I could make something,
Hmm.
you know. Hey, you got any are you listening to any music?
Yeah, I got turned on to a couple bands um, by our friend Jamie. Um, and you know, I think I've heard of both of these bands, but I just didn't never really, you know, like did the dive until recently. One is called Yard Act, and they are kind of like that, you know, that wave of talk singing bands like Dry Cleaning and Fontaines DC and Idols, IDLES. I always have to spell it, but uh, yeah, Yard Act. It's pretty cool. Um, I don't know. It's very interesting. It's, to me, it seems like kind of a response to hip hop. Like there's a lot of bands that are that with the non-melodic vocals, you know, where they're just kind of talking, but then the music behind it is kind of more like post-punk, kind of like edgy rock. And yeah, they do that kind of thing very well. And
Cool,
then
I'll
the
have to
other
go check
band,
them out.
yeah, check them out. They're called Yard Act. They're on Bandcamp. And then the other band is called Chick Chick Chick, but it's spelled exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And their URL, of course, is not exclamation points. It's chk chk.net or whatever, but they're on Bandcamp as well. And they're kind of like dance music, you know, kind of, I don't know, with one foot in kind of hip hop, I think.
Nice. I'll have to check them out.
It's fun, high energy, rock and roll kind of stuff.
Nice.
How about you? What are you listening to?
Uh, you know, I didn't listen to anything new. I listened to CB3 again, you know, because I took some notes. So I listened to their Aeons album, you know. They're from like, I don't know, like from the Netherlands or something, or Sweden, I guess. They're
Okay.
Swedish.
Have you
Yeah.
talked about them on
I
the
think I
chat?
mentioned them. So I kind of found out about them a couple weeks ago, and so then I've been kind of exploring their albums, you know. So I listened to that one album and then took some notes. I just sat down and like made a listening, you know. It was not didn't do anything else. I just listened to the album, you know. It was kind of good.
Cool.
Yeah, I was digging it, you know.
Yeah, I don't think I've checked that out. So I'll take a look.
Yeah, they have a couple albums. I guess they used to be a jazz trio, and then now they're doing this kind of psychedelic stoner rock kind of thing, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of fun. Cool. You got any final words for today?
How about uh, join Eurorack SF if you're so inclined. We'll keep a link to that in the description. If you're still inclined, if you're into like synthesizer stuff, and especially if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, um, join our numbers. It's gonna be
Our numbers. Yeah. If you're into SF, you should try that out. We might do a meetup in the East Bay, maybe. What do you think
yeah.
about that? Would that be a weird idea?
It's a totally weird idea, but yeah, no, actually, I think probably I would almost imagine that there are more people in the East Bay and maybe more places where we could find a place to set up. Um, I mean, one thing I will say about having the meetup where we did at the coffee house in San Francisco, it's right on the same block as the SF synthesizer store,
Mission Sense.
Mission Synth, and yeah, that's like if you need to get started and you need to buy all your Eurorack stuff, or you need to buy a Micro Freak, or you need to buy, like a big Moog synthesizer, whatever. They've got a lot of stuff right there in the store for you to try out. It's really, really cool. Some really
They had a
great,
cool shop. I thought their shop was cool.
yeah,
They have free stickers too, so if you don't buy anything, you just have a free sticker.
yeah, yeah, and friendly staff.
Yeah, they were pretty friendly.
Yeah.
Right on. Cool. Well, let's call it a day. We'll see y'all later.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.